Chapter 6. Daniel's Remarkable Prophecy. In Genesis 11:6, we find one of the most staggering statements in the Bible. Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. The occasion was God's visit to the Tower of Babel, and this declaration was the reason he gave for inflicting its builders with many languages, so that, unable to understand each other, they would be forced to abandon their diabolical project. Why diabolical? Because it so obviously echoed Satan's ambition. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Isaiah 14, verse 13. God had only recently destroyed Earth's inhabitants with a flood because man's imagination was only evil continually. Genesis 6, verse 5. And now, so soon after that great judgment, the descendants of Noah, whom God had spared so that mankind could make a fresh start upon earth, had focused the incredible power of imagination upon accomplishing the ultimate rebellion, to build a tower that would give them access to the very throne of God and thereby make them equal to him. History has proved that God's appraisal of the power of imagination was accurate and that his judgment was just. While man, unlike God, cannot create out of nothing, just try imagining a new prime color for the rainbow. His imagination is free to explore the most incredible utilization and manipulation of the forces innate within the universe which God has made and put at his disposal. And whatever he imagines, he will eventually find a way to perform. That man can ultimately develop whatever science, technology, or mad scheme he can imagine has been proved all too true. Yesterday's science fiction is today's fait accompli. And who would deny that man's imagination has repeatedly led him ever deeper into evil, so that wickedness thrives and Earth's very survival now hangs in the balance? Abandoned under God's judgment and left to crumble into ruin, Babel was rebuilt centuries later to carry on once again, from its summit, the worship of the stars and pagan deities. Around the tower was constructed the city of Babylon, capital of the first world empire. It became the center of astrology and sorcery, the epitome of false religion, and pursued the old Babel passion of reaching heaven through human ingenuity, in partnership with occult principalities and powers. Under the brilliant leadership of Nebuchadnezzar II, not only Babylon's fabled hanging gardens, but the entire city, covering more than 100 square miles, became one of the wonders of the ancient world. It was surrounded by a wall more than 100 feet high and 90 feet thick, upon the top of which 4 chariots could race abreast around the spectacular city. God used the mighty power of this empire to punish his people Israel for their idolatry. He even refers to Nebuchadnezzar as my servant, and declares that he has given Israel to him. Jeremiah 25, verse 9, 27, verse 6. Jerusalem was destroyed, its once invincible warriors killed or scattered, its proud people reduced to scavengers, and its nobility carried captive. And so it was, in the first deportation of Jews, that Daniel and his 3 companions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, of fiery furnace fame, were brought to Babylon in about 605 B.C. These 4 quickly distinguished themselves for their unflinching loyalty to the God of Israel. They absolutely refused to be corrupted in any way with Babylon's enticements, even to the food they ate. For this resolve God blessed them. In skill, knowledge, and wisdom, they were found to be 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers. Daniel chapter 1, verse 20, in the royal court of advisers, among whom they too served the king. That service put them in jeopardy of their lives. Unknown to them, Nebuchadnezzar had demanded that his inner circle of advisers reveal to him a dream he had had, along with its interpretation. The magicians and astrologers told the king that such an unreasonable request had never been made by any ruler. If he would tell them the dream, then they would give the interpretation. But the king had forgotten the dream, and now, for the first time, he saw through the charlatanry of his advisers. If they could not tell him the dream, then why should he believe their interpretation, or anything else they had been passing off as the secret knowledge to which they alone were privy? Enraged, Nebuchadnezzar gave the order for all the wise men in Babylon to be slain. When Daniel learned of the execution decree and the reason for it, he promised the king that he would show him the dream and its interpretation if the king would only give him time to pray to his God. That night, God revealed it all to Daniel in the first of many visions he would later receive. The next day he told the king, "There is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thou, O king, sawest a great image, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, and broke them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth." Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 and 31 through 35. Then Daniel gave the interpretation which God had revealed to him. He explained that Nebuchadnezzar, represented by the head of gold, was the ruler of the first world empire. The three other parts of the image, made of silver, brass, and iron, foreshadowed three more world empires that would follow Babylon as its successors. In a later vision, Daniel would be given the name of the second world empire, Medo-Persia, and details concerning the third kingdom which clearly identified it as the Grecian Empire. The fourth world empire, of course, would be Rome. That much is history. So accurate was Daniel that skeptics who deny that the Bible is inspired by God have tried to prove that Daniel was not the author of this book, but that it was actually written centuries later. Of course, it must have been written after these kingdoms had come and gone, they claim, for no one could so accurately foretell the future of world events of such magnitude. Unless, of course, he was inspired of God, as Daniel claimed and the evidence proves. In fact, it has been demonstrated that the book of Daniel was written during the Babylonian captivity, before the last two world empires came into existence. However, it was not the anticipation of these kingdoms that was the most outstanding part of Daniel's interpretation of the dream. It was the prophecy that the fourth, the Roman Empire, would be revived in the last days. If that indeed occurs, it is one of the most remarkable prophecies in the Bible. Its great importance will become clear as we proceed. The image revealed other insights as well that simply cannot be explained away. For example, the Roman Empire was represented by the two iron legs. Would it, in fact, be divided into two parts? Indeed it was, both politically and religiously, between East, Byzantium and the Eastern Orthodox Church, and West, Rome and Roman Catholicism, in the middle of the 4th century A.D. Early in the 5th century, the empire disintegrated politically under the onslaught of the barbarians. It remained united religiously in the West, however, under the Roman Catholic popes, who continue to rule from Rome to this day, and who must play a vital part in the revived empire as well. How do we know that it must be revived? Why couldn't the 10 toes represent some aspect of the original Roman Empire? There are a number of reasons. In explaining the 10 toes, Daniel made one of his most startling and important disclosures. "In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Daniel 2, verse 44. Obviously, what the toes represent has not yet come to pass. God's kingdom was not established in the days of these 10 kings. In fact, there never were such kings in the Roman Empire, not even during the Middle Ages. Although there were periods of division between rival emperors, there were never 10 at one time. When a division finally came, it was into 2 parts, as we have just noted, and not 10. Furthermore, the Antichrist never appeared to take the reins of the ancient Roman Empire. Therefore, it must be revived in order for him to do so. In a later vision, the angel Gabriel told Daniel that after the Messiah would come and would be cut off, that is, killed, the people of the prince, that is, Antichrist, that shall come shall destroy the city, Jerusalem, and the sanctuary, the temple. Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. In fulfillment of this amazing prophecy, and more than 600 years after Daniel wrote it, the Roman armies under Titus destroyed Jerusalem and its temple in 70 A.D., thereby identifying the people of the Antichrist. Nor can this be interpreted as simply meaning that the Antichrist would be born somewhere within the territorial boundaries of what used to be the Roman Empire. Once again, we have a compelling reason why that empire must be revived. Of course, Daniel did not use the term revived. He saw the feet and toes as a continuation of the empire, represented by the legs, which in turn was a continuance of the three empires that preceded it. It would be the people of the fourth empire who would and did destroy Jerusalem. But the people of this empire are also said to be the Antichrist's people, in his capacity as the prince that shall come. Since he obviously didn't reign over ancient Rome, that empire must be revived in order for Antichrist to reign over a people who are identified with it. In fact, he will be the new emperor over a world empire that has its roots in, and in many ways will resemble, the Roman Empire of the emperors and popes, as we shall see. Some writers have attempted to show that Nero was the Antichrist. He ruled, however, before Jerusalem was destroyed, whereas Antichrist's coming is said to be after this event. He would still be the prince that shall come at the time of Jerusalem's destruction. Nor did God destroy the Roman Empire during Nero's reign, or at any other time, in the manner depicted by the stone cut out without hands, in one sudden, irremediable blow. And certainly God did not set up his own eternal kingdom either during the days of Nero or at any other time during the existence of the ancient Roman Empire. Therefore, we can only conclude that the Roman Empire must be revived, so that these remaining elements of Daniel's remarkable prophecies can be fulfilled, including Christ's second coming to break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms represented by the 10 toes, Daniel 2 verse 44, and in their place set up his own millennial kingdom. As for the 10 toes, we have already expressed the opinion that they do not represent 10 nations in Western Europe. It seems more likely that the toes of the image represent 10 global regions into which the world will be divided under the Antichrist. These regions will probably be determined for computer convenience in controlling all banking and commerce under the new economic system that we read of in Revelation 13, verses 16 through 18. They may also coincide with the regional security councils that have been proposed since the Iraq-Kuwait crisis as the means of dealing with such emergencies in the future. It is beyond the scope of this book to deal with Daniel's prophecies in any depth. He predicts the very date of Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem as coming 69 heptads, that is weeks of years, 483 years, after the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, Daniel 9, verse 25. Archaeologists have discovered and dated the letter of Artaxerxes Longimanus, giving Nehemiah the authority to rebuild Jerusalem, Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 4 through 8. It just happens to have been written exactly 483 years to the day before the event now celebrated as Palm Sunday. This fact was investigated and verified by Sir Robert Anderson, for many years head of the Criminal Investigation Division of Scotland Yard and an outstanding Christian. He provides the evidence in his book, The Coming Prince. In the midst of these details, we must be careful not to lose sight of the big picture. It is not just a kingdom or even a world empire that is being revived, but everything represented by Babel, in which all of the kingdoms depicted by Nebuchadnezzar's image had their roots. Not only the Roman Empire, but Babylon itself, where Babel was first resurrected, will also be revived. Thus, in the vision given to the Apostle John of the last days, Rome is called Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Further discussion of that quote-unquote mystery must be deferred until chapter 10. As we have seen, Babel became Babylon, the center of occult religion, sensuality, opulence, and worldly power. Down through the centuries, it has represented man's rebellion against God through attempting to play God by his own genius and psychic power in partnership with Satan. The Bible reveals that this entire Babylonian religious political system will reach its zenith in the last days under the Antichrist, and that God will judge and destroy it. That judgment was first pronounced by Isaiah with these words: Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. Isaiah 13, verses 19 and 20. For years, the above scripture was read in churches around the world, accompanied by slides of the ruins of ancient Babylon, as proof that, just as Isaiah had prophesied, Babylon had not been rebuilt and never would be. Unfortunately for that interpretation, ancient Babylon is now in the process of being rebuilt by none other than the infamous Saddam Hussein, whose megalomania required that his name be stamped on every one of the millions of bricks used in its reconstruction. Hussein imagines himself to be the new Nebuchadnezzar, who will lead a united Arab confederacy, the revived Babylonian kingdom, and once again destroy Israel. The logo for the 1987 and 1988 festivals held in Babylon contained two faces in profile, Nebuchadnezzar's on the left and Hussein's on the right. The theme for both festivals was, From Nebuchadnezzar to Saddam Hussein, Babylon undergoes a renaissance. So has the Bible been proved wrong after all? No, the above scripture has simply been misinterpreted. Isaiah puts this destruction in the day of the Lord, when God will punish the world, and his description, Isaiah 13, verses 9 through 11, sounds like the Great Tribulation of Matthew 24. He was foretelling the destruction of Babylon in the last days, the future destruction that John describes in Revelation 18. That the Bible is not referring to a reconstructed city of Babylon in Iraq, as Hussein is foolishly attempting to do, should be clear. Something far more important is involved. God is foretelling his final judgment upon a great evil which began at the Tower of Babel and which has only grown as politics, religion, and science have become more sophisticated, until finally the whole world is united in the pursuit of Satan's ancient lie. This is the Babylon, revived and headquartered in Rome, that will be destroyed, never to be inhabited again. This world system that has usurped the place of Jerusalem in attempting to rule the world must be demolished. Then Jerusalem will be restored to its rightful place, with Christ reigning there over his millennial kingdom. God's solution at the original Babel was to confound the languages and scatter mankind in order to prevent the very disaster that the world now hastens toward. Paul explained that one of the purposes of God's judgment at Babel was to set bounds upon the nations, keeping them apart, in order to encourage them to seek him according to truth. Acts 17, verses 26 and 27. Instead, still bent upon rebellion and the desire to play God with the universe and to establish himself independently of his Creator, modern man declares that he is going to undo what God did at Babel. He is going to unscramble Earth's languages through simultaneous translation techniques and communication satellites, and unite as one the nations of the world once again. Not only is Babel being revived, but a trend is developing to boast in that fact, as though daring God to oppose it this time. It is remarkable how many times Babel is being associated with modern efforts to unite the world once again in a common purpose and language. The official poster of the Council of Europe, representing the EC, is a case in point. It depicts the EC as the Tower of Babel under construction, with 12 stars above it representing the 12 nations of the new united Europe. The caption reads, "Europe, many tongues, one voice." Others are picking up the same theme. In its special insert in the European edition of the Wall Street Journal for the second quarter of 1990, IBM also depicted the new united Europe as the Tower of Babel, under construction and transmuting into the skyscrapers of modern cities. Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, too, has taken up this same thesis. Advertising its capabilities in magazines such as Scientific American, Lockheed declares that its computer systems are designed to combat the Babel effect and to get everyone back together in a global understanding once again. Is this sudden focus upon rebuilding Babel merely a coincidence? Whether it is or not, the fact remains that the projects represented by that theme fulfill Bible prophecy in a way that has never been done before. The scenario becomes macabre when one notices that the 12 stars representing the members of the EC on the Council of Europe poster are not ordinary stars, but upside-down pentagrams, the symbol of the goat of Mendes, or Satan. Coincidence again? Interesting question.